Whether you're using Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, or another software that deals with print design, you have to make sure to set up your document with the basic settings that relate to either print or digital design. When you're working with print, it's important that you remember that you're working with inches. The reason why is because when you print something, you're creating an actual physical object, and we care about the actual physical dimensions. So think about normal photo sizes, 4x6, 5x7, 8x10. Those are actual measurements in inches. And it doesn't matter who you are or how you're looking at it, it's still always going to be 5x7, 4x6, or 8x10. In addition, when it comes to print, you should always use at least 300 resolution. This is going to make it so that your document is crystal clear and doesn't have any blurry or pixelated areas. Anything less than this is going to result in a low quality printed image. You don't actually even have to go higher than this. The only time you'd want to go higher is if you're going to create something really big, such as a billboard. And for a billboard, usually we say to use 600 resolution. Last but not least, as you've probably seen with your own personal printer, there is ink inside of that printer, and it's usually CMYK ink. Now you could have 4 different ink cartridges that relate to the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, or some of the earlier printers or kind of cheaper printers will have just the black in one ink cartridge, and then the cyan, magenta, and yellow will be all in one color cartridge. Those are usually not the best printers because it wastes a lot of ink that you don't necessarily need. So if you can, you usually want to buy a printer that uses the 4-color process. But when you're designing something for digital, your settings are different. And here's why. When you're designing something for a computer monitor, a phone, a tablet, you're only concerned with the pixels because it doesn't necessarily matter how big physically that thing is, because somebody could be looking at it from a really large monitor to a really small phone, or they could have high resolution so everything is real crystal clear but small, or low resolution so it's kind of blurry and fuzzy but big. So you can't really control how people are seeing that artwork because you don't know what device they're going to use. So instead we use pixels instead of inches. And then for the resolution, most devices can only handle 72 resolution. Now, with things like Apple's Retina display devices coming out, you can do a higher resolution, but 72 resolution is going to give you a pretty good result. And as for the color model that you should use, it's not actually using any kind of ink, it's just using the light source from the monitor. So we use RGB, which stands for red, green, blue color, because that's how the devices were built with a RGB color space. So let's go ahead and see how to do this in both Photoshop and Illustrator. If I go to File, New, you can see that when you create a new document, you can choose a preset. So we have US paper, photo. So let's just click photo, and you can see that there are standard sizes that you can choose from. So you can do landscape or portrait in various sizes. So let's do landscape 5x7. And as you can see, it automatically sets up your settings to be perfect for print. We have inches, 300 resolution, and CMYK color. So let's see what happens when we change to web. We can click on web, and then we have various sizes, and it doesn't mean you have to stick with these sizes. I could do 1000 by 1000 if I wanted to, but let's go ahead and change the size, and now it's working with pixels, 72 resolution, and RGB. So Photoshop is really helpful because it tries to set those settings for you. There are going to come times where you need to not have a standard size setting, and that's okay. What I would do is if I went to print, I would go to US paper, and then I would change whatever inches I needed to, and then make sure it's 300 and change this to CMYK. In Illustrator, it's sort of similar. Let's go ahead and open this. If I go to File, New, oops, not New from Template, we'll go to File, New. And now here is where you're going to choose number of artboards, what's the spacing between artboards, so we don't really need to worry about that, but we also have this profile where I can say I'm doing something in print, and right now the units are points, so let's just change that to inches so that we're used to that. So now this is 8.5 by 11, so I can change this to the width of 7 by 5, regular 5 by 7, and again you have all these different custom sizes, but it doesn't have photo sizes. And then I can choose a bleed, and as you can see, I can click on this advanced and make sure it's CMYK and it has a high resolution. If I change my profile to web, then it automatically changes it to pixels, and it also changes the color mode to RGB and screen of 72 resolution pixels per inch. So that's perfect. So if you're ever in doubt, just make sure you choose the correct profile or preset in Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator, and then just make sure to change your sizes and double check that you're using pixels for digital, inches for print, 300 resolution for print, 72 resolution for web, and web will use RGB, or digital will use RGB, and print will use CMYK.